It was supposed to be a reset button. A Christmas getaway in a secluded cabin up in the Colorado Rockies, no phones, no work emails, just us. I found the place online, a rustic little two-bedroom spot with a stone fireplace and a hot tub overlooking the valley. It felt like the perfect gift for Haley, who'd been complaining for months about burnout. And to be fair, I was burned out too, from life, from the city, from the quiet tension that had been settling into our marriage like dust on a shelf. We arrived on Christmas Eve. The roads were clear but flanked with snowbanks, and pine trees lined the driveway like sentinels guarding our peace. Haley seemed excited at first, or at least she played the part well. She snapped a few pictures of the cabin, posted them to her story with a heart emoji, and kissed me on the cheek before unpacking her suitcase. For a few hours, things felt right. We had dinner, steak and red wine, and listened to a cheesy holiday playlist while we decorated the small tree I'd pre-arranged with the rental company. Haley laughed when she found a box labeled ornaments on the kitchen counter. "You really went all out," she said, giving me that soft, familiar smile I used to live for. But then, like always, she wandered off to her phone. I was stacking firewood just outside the back door when I heard it vibrate on the counter. It buzzed twice, long, insistent. I figured it was one of her sisters, maybe her boss checking in, but something about the urgency made me glance inside. The screen was still lit. I'm not proud of what I did, but I looked. There was a message. No name, just a number. A photo had come through with it. Haley at a restaurant table, clearly mid-laugh, with a man I didn't recognize leaning in close beside her. It was an in**mate kind of photo, the sort people take when they're sharing more than just a meal. Candlelight flickered at the edge of the frame. Her hair was down, curled at the ends like she only ever did for special occasions. The worst part wasn't even the image. It was the timestamp. Last Thursday. That was the night she said she had to stay late at work, finishing slides for some marketing presentation. She hadn't come home until nearly midnight. I remember I was half asleep when she walked in. She smelled like perfume and wine. I asked how the presentation went. She smiled, kissed me on the forehead, and said I nailed it. I believed her. Now I was staring at proof that I shouldn't have. The sound of the front door opening jolted me out of the moment. She walked in, cheeks flushed from the cold, a small bag of groceries in one hand and a little peppermint tin in the other. "Got the marshmallows," she chirped, breezing past me to drop her things on the kitchen counter. "I figured we could do s'mores by the fire, just like we used to. Remember in Aspen?" Her eyes landed on her phone, still lit. Still on the counter. And just like that, the mood shifted. She grabbed it like it was a ticking bomb. Her smile faltered, not enough that most people would notice, but I did. I'd lived with that smile for nearly 7 years. I knew when it was real. "Something wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Too neutral, probably. She didn't answer right away. Just tapped the screen, glanced down at the message, and then back up at me. "Group chat from work," she said casually. "We were talking about that dinner we had last week. Someone must have dug up that photo." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the night you were working late?" She blinked. "Yeah," she said quickly, recovering. "It was a last-minute thing. Office Christmas dinner. I didn't think it was worth mentioning." A pause. Just a breath too long. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to stress you out," she added. "You've been so tense lately." That's when she flipped the switch. "Lucas, why are you looking at my phone?" Her voice wasn't angry, not exactly. It was measured. Calm. Like a therapist trying to guide a child through bad behavior. "It buzzed," I replied. "Twice. That doesn't mean you get to snoop through my stuff." "Jesus, Lucas, do you even hear yourself?" I backed off. "I always did." She went on about how I'd been distant lately, how I always assumed the worst, how exhausting it was to feel like she was constantly under surveillance. She said it was getting hard to breathe in our marriage, like every conversation was a minefield. Then she pulled the ultimate move. She cried. Not a sob. Just a few well-placed tears and a quiet, "I don't know what happened to us." And that was it. The conversation was over. We didn't talk about the photo again. She made hot chocolate while I started the fire, and we spent the rest of the evening in silence, the kind of silence that only exists between two people pretending they're okay. I stared at the flames and tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid in bed with Haley beside me, her back turned, phone glowing faintly in her hands as she texted God knows who. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the scene again and again, the photo, the timestamp, the way she turned it all back on me like I was the one who crossed a line. And for the first time in years, I felt something crack. I'd always trusted her. Always defended her, even when friends joked that she was a little too flirty or when her explanations didn't quite add up. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because that's what love is, right? Choosing to believe in someone even when the evidence makes it hard. But that night, lying in that rented bed in that cozy cabin, I realized I wasn't choosing anymore. I was just avoiding. Something was wrong. And I was done pretending it wasn't. That night in the cabin didn't just leave a bruise, it fractured something. It opened a door I'd kept locked for a long time. After Haley fell asleep, I lay there in the dark, listening to her quiet breathing and staring at the rafters above, wondering how many other moments I had ignored. At first, they were just flickers in my memory. But the more I leaned in, the more they started to stack. Like dry leaves in a pile, one or two don't seem like much, but when they gather, you realize it's fuel waiting for a spark. There was the book club, for starters. She told me she was joining one a few months ago, a way to decompress, to connect with people outside work. I thought it was a great idea. Even encouraged her. But now I remembered how secretive she'd been about the books they were supposedly reading. I once asked her the name of the latest one and she hesitated, then said something generic like, "It's about grief and healing." When I pressed, she changed the subject. Then came the cocktail bar receipt. It had shown up in the laundry, tucked inside the back pocket of her jeans. Paper trail, I joked at the time, not realizing just how accurate I was. It was dated the same night she said she had a meeting with a prospective client. A high-end lounge downtown, not exactly a business setting. I even remembered what she'd worn that day. A tailored blouse that hugged her a little more than usual. Lipstick that matched her heels. I thought she was dressing up for the meeting. Now I wasn't so sure. And what about the team-building retreats? 3 in the past 6 months, each one at a different upscale resort. She always came back energized but evasive, talking in circles, never naming coworkers, brushing off my curiosity with "You wouldn't know them, Lucas." I believed her. Hell, I even dropped her off at the airport once with flowers and a kiss goodbye. She laughed, said I was too romantic for my own good. I was such an idiot. Even her fitness obsession hadn't registered as a red flag at first. She used to skip the gym for lazy mornings in bed. But somewhere around June, she became a different person. Waking up at 6, drinking smoothies, tracking macros. It was like she was chasing someone else's life. I'd compliment her transformation, thinking I was being supportive. She'd smile, say thank you, and then vanish for hours. Trevor Blaine. That was the name that finally floated up from the fog. She'd mentioned him once, casually. Her motivator at the gym. A personal trainer who helped her focus. She said he had great energy and an even better playlist. I laughed it off, teased her about her new gym crush. She rolled her eyes, called me dramatic. But now I remembered how she smiled when she said his name. And how she never said it again. Her phone had become a locked vault over time. Always face down, always on silent. The password changed without warning. If I reached for it to check the time, she'd flinch. Boundaries, she'd say, as if she were teaching a lesson in a workshop. I once joked that she was having an affair with her Pinterest board. She didn't laugh. There was one night I'll never forget. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie. She got a text, her phone buzzed against her leg, and she snatched it up so fast you'd think it was a ticking bomb. I saw the color drain from her face. She claimed it was a work emergency and disappeared into the bedroom to take the call. I paused the movie. When she came back, she acted like nothing happened. Another time, I caught her in the garage, standing by her car with the door half open, typing furiously on her phone. When I approached, she jumped and quickly said she was checking her tire pressure light. At midnight? In heels? It didn't make sense then. It makes too much sense now. Even her scent had changed. I don't mean perfume, though, that too had shifted. She started wearing something new, something musky and floral, unlike the citrusy fragrance she'd worn since college. No, I mean her overall presence. It was colder. Sharper. She moved through our house like a guest. Always too busy, too distracted. When she touched me, it felt like an obligation. Like she was clocking in for a role she no longer wanted to play. But I played along. God, I played along. Because I didn't want to know. Because I loved her. Because I was afraid that asking the hard questions would break the illusion we were both desperately clinging to. I even remember a conversation with my brother a few weeks before Christmas. He and his wife came over for dinner, and as Haley was in the kitchen, he leaned in and said, "She seems elsewhere, man. Everything okay?" I brushed him off, told him she was just tired. "Work's been crazy," I said, repeating the lie she'd been feeding me. "She's not wearing her ring," he added quietly. I froze. It was true. I hadn't noticed until he said it, but there it was, an empty ring finger, as if the promise we made in front of 100 people meant nothing now. That night, I asked her about it. She claimed she'd taken it off while baking and forgot to put it back on. "You're being dramatic," she laughed. "Don't go full jealous husband on me." I let it slide. I always let it slide. But not anymore. After that Christmas Eve, I started retracing everything like I was building a case, because maybe, deep down, I looked through old texts, receipts, her calendar. I noticed inconsistencies, little shifts, dates that didn't match, meetings that never showed up on her work planner, restaurant charges for two, not one. I told myself I wasn't looking for proof, but I was, because something inside me had shifted. I was no longer afraid of the truth. I was afraid of continuing to live in a lie. And Haley, the woman I once thought was the most honest person I knew, had become a stranger with a familiar face. One evening, I stared at her from across the living room as she scrolled through her phone, her expression unreadable. She looked up and caught my eye. "What?" she asked, half smiling. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile back. "Just thinking." And I was thinking that love shouldn't feel like a mystery, that trust shouldn't be a puzzle you're forced to solve, that maybe the worst betrayal isn't the moment someone lies. It's the months you spend lying to yourself so you don't have to admit what you already know. She returned to her scrolling. I returned to my silence. But something had changed. I wasn't going to ignore the signs anymore. I was done being the blind husband in someone else's story. The thing about suspicion is it doesn't stay still. It grows, morphs, becomes an obsession if you let it. And by January, that's exactly what it became for me. I wasn't just living with a knot in my stomach anymore. I was feeding it, watering it, watching it flourish into something I couldn't ignore. I needed proof, not just for closure, not even for justice. I needed it for clarity. I needed to see it with my own eyes, because the pieces in my head were starting to overlap with dreams, fantasies, nightmares. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. And I was tired of playing detective in a story where I didn't even know the ending. So I made a plan. It started with something simple, an opportunity. One night, I told Haley I had to stay late at work. She barely blinked, just nodded, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Don't work too hard." That was the moment I knew. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't ask. Know where? Know why? She used to worry, used to check in. That night, I was a ghost, and she was glad for it. Instead of going to the office, I parked my car a few blocks away from a 2-story gray house on Maplewood Street. The address Haley had given me 3 weeks ago when she said she was going to a meditation circle with some friends. I had nodded at the time, made a dumb joke about herbal tea and deep breathing. She laughed, told me not to wait up. But I had done some digging. The address didn't belong to any wellness center or community space. It belonged to Trevor Blaine. That name again resurfacing like oil in water. Trevor, her gym motivator. The man who had quietly disappeared from our conversations. I sat in my car that night with the engine off and the windows slightly cracked. It was freezing, but I didn't feel it. My pulse was a heater all its own. I watched through the windshield, waiting. At 7:14 p.m., a rideshare pulled up. Haley stepped out, wearing a navy peacoat over what looked like a cocktail dress. Her hair was curled at the ends. Her heels clicked on the pavement. She had a bottle of wine in one hand and a small wrapped box in the other. My breath caught in my throat. She paused at the front door, checked her reflection in the window glass, and rang the bell. Trevor opened the door. He was in a fitted black sweater, the kind that looks casual but costs too much. They exchanged a quick smile, then a hug. But it wasn't the kind of hug you give a friend. It lingered. Hands slid, chins tilted, and then they kissed. I felt my stomach drop like a sinkhole, like gravity had finally noticed me and decided to pull everything down at once. I didn't take a photo, didn't reach for my phone. I just watched, frozen, as they disappeared inside, the door closing softly behind them. It was real. Everything I had feared, everything I had denied, was now carved into memory. But I wasn't done. That night, I sat alone in the dark, scrolling through old emails on Haley's tablet. She used to leave it on the kitchen island, password protected but lazy. One guess, our anniversary date, and I was in. At first, it was the usual promotions, newsletters, Amazon orders. But buried in the archived folder were messages that didn't belong. Threads titled Business Proposal and Follow-up from last Thursday. I opened them. They weren't love letters. Nothing romantic. They were logistical. Cold. Precise. Attached is the transfer receipt $25K processed via Zelle. That should cover the second installment. Let me know when you secure the LLC. I don't want the account in my name. Do not mention this to anyone, even in passing. Paper trail equals liability. There were 6 transfers in total. $130,000. From our joint investment account to an entity named Blaine Performance Concepts, LLC. A shell. A front. Haley wasn't just cheating emotionally or physically, she was financially entangled. She had siphoned off over 6 figures to fund a business venture with the man she was sleeping with. My vision blurred. My fingers shook. I felt like I was standing in the eye of a tornado, completely still but surrounded by chaos. My life, the life I thought I had, was being dismantled line by line, bite by bite. And yet, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I started organizing. I created folders sorted by date, by subject, by keyword. I backed up everything to a secure drive, timestamped each file. I cataloged receipts, calendar invites, location pings. I took *TS, saved PDF copies, recorded voice memos summarizing what I found. This wasn't revenge. It was preparation. By morning, I had an outline of a story that was no longer just a hunch. It was a case file. A digital autopsy of a marriage that had died months ago. I just hadn't buried it yet. Over the next 2 weeks, I stayed calm. Played my part. Laughed at her jokes. Kissed her forehead. Asked about her yoga group with a smile. I even brought her coffee in bed one morning, and she looked at me with guilt in her eyes, like a child who'd just broken a vase and was waiting to be punished. But I said nothing. I wanted her to feel safe. Because once she thought I'd gone blind again, that's when I'd move. I hired a digital forensic analyst, a guy named Marcus who'd once helped me recover a corrupted hard drive. I told him I was building a legal archive for a sensitive situation, and he didn't ask questions. He verified the metadata on the files, confirmed the authenticity of the email headers, and even recovered deleted drafts from Haley's tablet. One of them chilled me to the bone. It was never sent, but it was saved under Draft 1, Exit Plan. Trevor. Lucas is smarter than I thought. If this falls apart, I need to know what you've got in place. I can't afford to lose my half. Don't talk to anyone. Delete this. H. I sat there reading it over and over, the edges of my world curling like burning paper. She wasn't just lying. She was preparing for war. I didn't tell anyone. Not my brother. Not my best friend. Not even my therapist. This was mine now, a secret that lived between me and the growing silence in our house. Some nights, I'd lie awake next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering what story she was telling herself to justify it all. That I was distant? That she felt unseen? That she had no choice? But I did see her. And what I saw now I couldn't unsee. So I waited. One night, she asked if I'd be okay handling taxes this year. Trevor's accountant offered to help, she said with a soft smile, but it might be easier if you just take care of it. I nodded, smiled back. Sure, I said. I've got it covered. And I did. Because by then I wasn't just preparing for divorce. I was preparing for extraction. A full, clean severing with documentation, with strategy, with no room left for denial. She had made her choices. Now I was making mine. By February, the truth had settled in my bones. It no longer burned. It no longer stung. It had turned into something colder, more calculated, a quiet, controlled fury that pushed me to act with precision, not emotion. I wasn't going to blow up our life in some dramatic confrontation. No yelling. No accusations thrown across a table. Haley had crafted a lie too carefully to be taken down with just words. If I wanted justice, not just closure, I needed to be smarter than she was deceitful. So I started laying the groundwork. It began with a lawyer, Paige Mendez, a specialist in high-asset divorces and digital evidence cases. She came recommended through a friend who'd gone through something equally messy. When I first met her, she listened in silence as I laid everything out, every detail, every transfer, every file. By the end, she tapped a finger against her notepad and said, "You've already done half my job. I want this clean," I told her. No loopholes. No room for negotiation. Paige nodded. Then we'll go in quiet and we'll hit hard. Her team helped me secure financial documents, freeze accounts under suspicion, and file an injunction to prevent any transfer or sale of shared property. I gave her access to the backups I'd made, photos, emails, spreadsheets, even the deleted drafts Marcus had recovered. She organized everything into an airtight timeline, labeling each section with names like establishment of fraud and pattern of deception. It felt surreal watching my marriage turned into a legal exhibit. But there was something deeply satisfying about it, too. Like I was reclaiming ownership over my own story. Haley had no idea. She still moved through our home like nothing had changed, smiling over breakfast, texting in silence, humming to herself while folding laundry. But I could see it now, the guilt, the cracks. When I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, she would flinch ever so slightly. She'd grown quieter, more guarded, like someone afraid of setting off a trap she couldn't see. And she was right to be afraid. I had access to her tablet, still logged in under the same passcode she used for everything. Each week, I'd comb through her apps, noting patterns. Messages from Trevor were fewer now, shorter, more clipped. They weren't fighting, exactly. But something was shifting. I saw it in the way he wrote, "Handle your end. This can't blow back on me. I need the rest of the cash now." One message caught my eye. "Too risky. Shut it down. He's watching." I read that line over and over, wondering how much Trevor suspected. Or worse, what Haley had told him. By then, I'd already moved our savings into a protected account under my name. I'd separated my paycheck from our shared pool, canceled automatic transfers, and rerouted key financial statements to a private mailbox I opened downtown. Through a quiet court motion, we secured a temporary freeze on any assets not proven to be individual property. The house, the cars, the joint investments, all locked. Haley wouldn't know until it was too late. I even hired a surveillance team not to watch her, but to watch Trevor. One of Paige's contacts ran a licensed agency that specialized in quiet collection, which I learned was legal speak for "we know how to stay invisible." They tracked his movements for 2 weeks, documenting every client visit, every gym session, and most importantly, every woman he met. There were 3, not counting Haley. The report was extensive: photos, times, interactions. I had them printed, bound, and stored away. I didn't intend to use them. Not yet. One afternoon, I returned early from work, claiming a canceled meeting. Haley was in the living room, startled to see me home. "You okay?" she asked, flipping her phone over instinctively. "Fine," I said with a smile. "Just figured I'd take the rest of the day for myself." She hesitated. "Want to do something together?" I shook my head. "Nah. I think I'll go for a drive. Clear my head." The lie was smooth. I'd gotten good at that. Instead of driving aimlessly, I met with a private mediator downtown, a neutral party to oversee future property negotiations. Paige had advised we lock in someone before serving the divorce papers, just in case Haley tried to pull a PR stunt once she realized the ship was sinking. That night, Haley cooked dinner, carbonara, one of my favorites. She poured wine, lit candles. There was a strange, strained in asterisk Macy to it all. She even wore the necklace I gave her for our 4th anniversary, the one she hadn't worn in over a year. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the 2 of us. Somewhere warm. Mexico, maybe?" My heart slowed. "A vacation?" She nodded, smiling too brightly. "We could use it, don't you think? Start fresh." I smiled back. "Yeah," I said. "That sounds perfect." We clinked glasses. And the next morning I set the date. Friday, 9 a.m. She'd be served while I was out of town visiting my brother in Chicago. I wanted no part in the aftermath. No confrontation. Just silence and the weight of her own consequences. On Thursday, I left early, bags packed. Haley hugged me at the door, a little too tightly, as if sensing something was slipping through her fingers. "Text me when you land," she said. "Of course." I kissed her forehead. Then I drove away, not to the airport, but to a hotel 20 minutes outside the city. I checked in under a different name and waited. At 9 a.m. sharp, my phone lit up with a single word from Paige. Delivered. Haley had come home from the grocery store to find a man in a navy suit standing in the driveway holding an envelope. Inside was everything: the divorce petition, asset freeze order, financial disclosures, and a letter drafted by me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was clear. I told her the truth. I knew everything. The money. The affair. The lies. I told her I wasn't interested in explanations or apologies. That the marriage we had was already gone and I was simply making it official. I left no room for negotiation. Just facts. The rest of that day passed like a storm that never quite touched down. My phone buzzed for hours: calls, texts, emails. All from her. I didn't answer any of them. She even tried calling my brother. He didn't answer either. That evening I got one final message. "Lucas, please? Can we talk? Just once." I didn't reply. Instead, I stared out my hotel window at the slow dusk creeping across the skyline. I thought about the man I was 6 months ago, hopeful, blind, trying to force a broken picture back into focus. And I thought about the man I was now, clear-eyed, prepared, and done. The morning after the papers were served, Haley's silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. No more calls. No more texts. Just nothing. I imagined her sitting in our kitchen, reading every page of that legal packet, the weight of my letter pressing down on her like a collapsing ceiling. She'd never seen me as capable of this. Of boundaries. Of defense. Of walking away. But now the boundaries were carved in stone. And her world, the one she built with borrowed trust and quiet deception, was about to shrink. The court's preliminary injunction was already in place. Paige made sure of it. No access to our joint accounts. No ability to liquidate or transfer shared assets. She couldn't touch the investments. Couldn't sell the car. Couldn't even enter the safety deposit box we'd opened together 2 years ago. Everything was locked tighter than a submarine hatch. And the house? Mine, at least temporarily. The court granted me exclusive residence until the separation hearing. Haley was given 30 days to make alternate arrangements. She could retrieve personal belongings, but only with 48-hour written notice and only when I wasn't home. That part hurt more than I thought it would. Not because I wanted to see her God, no, but because of how final it made everything feel. We weren't even circling around each other anymore. We were ghosts in different timelines, one just beginning to see the ruins, the other already rebuilding. I didn't return to Chicago right away. I stayed at the hotel for 3 more nights, letting the shockwave roll through on its own. I needed her to sit with it, to stare at the crater she helped create and realize there was no way back across. When I did finally return home, the place was untouched. No broken plates, no dramatic scrawlings on the mirror. Just silence. There was a note on the counter, scribbled in that perfect looping script of hers. "I don't know how we got here. Please let me explain. H." I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash without reading the rest. She didn't deserve the luxury of explanation anymore. Paige called me that afternoon. "She's hired counsel," she said. "Initial response was filed this morning. No contest on separation. Some pushback on assets." I expected that. Haley had always been calculating. She'd fight for whatever she thought she could still control. But what she hadn't realized yet was that the financial transfers she made to Trevor, those investments in a phantom company, were going to be her undoing. Fraud, Paige called it. Dissipation of marital assets. The term sounded cold, clinical, almost like surgery. And in a way, that's what this was, cutting out a cancer before it spread. I filed a motion to recover the transferred funds, attaching our full bank statements and the metadata trail. Trevor's name was on all of it, linked to the LLC account, which had recently gone dormant. The last known withdrawal had been a $40,000 transfer to an untraceable shell account in another state. After that, nothing. Haley was going to have to answer for that. In more ways than one. Within a week, my attorney received a letter from her legal team requesting mediation. Not negotiation. Not surrender. Mediation. They wanted time. Wanted understanding. Wanted sympathy, probably. What they didn't realize was I was fresh out. The next filing came from the tax board. Apparently, one of the flag transfers had triggered a notice, something about undeclared income and improper classification. It wasn't criminal yet, but it was enough for them to open a preliminary audit. Haley would be pulled into that too. I didn't do it to ruin her life. But when you lie to someone for long enough, steal from them, dismantle a life they helped build, you don't get to choose which consequences hit first. My brother flew in that weekend, stayed with me for a few days. We didn't talk about Haley much. Just drank beers on the porch, watched the snow melt off the roof, and filled the silence with sports and old stories. He knew what I needed without asking. "You're handling this better than most would," he said one night. I just nodded. Because I didn't react, I told him. I responded. Haley tried to contact me twice during that time. Once through a mutual friend, Nina, who texted me asking if I'd be open to hearing Haley out. I told her thanks, but no. Then again through her attorney, who suggested a private conversation before things get more adversarial. I declined. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a consequence. She wasn't just isolated from me anymore. She was isolated, period. Trevor had gone dark, his accounts inactive, his number disconnected. She'd asked her lawyer to find him, which I found out through back channels. But no luck. He was a ghost now. Vanished with the last of her stolen money and left her holding the blame. Her work life began to fracture too. I heard from a contact, discreetly, that her employer had initiated a review into her financial conduct. The company couldn't afford the bad optics if it turned out she'd funneled money through personal accounts during business hours. It didn't help that some of the email transfers had come from her work laptop. HR started asking questions. People started whispering. She'd spent years building an image polished, composed, inspirational. The kind of woman who gave TEDx talks on authentic living. Now she was a cautionary tale in a pantsuit. Family and friends stopped reaching out. The ones who had been on the Christmas card list every year didn't want to take sides. They retreated in quiet waves, offering passive sympathy to both of us and active support to neither. I didn't mind. The distance was a blessing. It let me breathe. The house felt different too. Not emptier, just clearer. Her perfume didn't linger in the hallway anymore. Her framed quotes had come down. The closet smelled like cedar again, not designer fragrances. It felt like mine for the first time in years. I moved her remaining belongings into the garage, boxed and labeled. I sent her attorney the inventory list, noting each item with photo proof and timestamps. She was allowed to collect them with a court-appointed neutral present. She never came. They sent someone else. A courier. The same woman who once told me we should always talk through things, no matter how hard. The same woman who once cried in our kitchen over a sad movie saying, "I don't believe in villains. Just people making desperate choices." And maybe that's true. But desperation doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't justify turning love into a transaction. The last thing she left behind was a silver bracelet tucked in the drawer of our bathroom vanity. I almost missed it. For a second, I thought about mailing it to her. Then I tossed it in a donation box, shut the lid, and moved on. There was no note. No apology. Just the quiet vacuum of someone unraveling from the inside out. The court scheduled the preliminary division hearing for late spring. Haley's lawyer filed a motion to extend. Paige blocked it. We weren't giving her time to maneuver. Every delay gave her more room to twist the narrative, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite this into something it wasn't. By March, she was boxed in. Legally restricted. Financially cornered. Socially alone. And I finally was free. I didn't need to see it firsthand to know Haley's world was caving in. The signs were everywhere, silent ripples spreading outward from the choices she'd made. Trevor had vanished completely, along with the last of the money she siphoned from our accounts. Her lawyer tried locating him through his LLC and failed. The man she once defended as ambitious had ghosted her the moment things got complicated. The investment was never real. She was under investigation now, first civil, then federal. Paige forwarded a notice from the tax board that confirmed they were flagging her filings. There were questions about the source of funds, about where the money went, and whether she had knowingly participated in a fraudulent transaction. The audit wasn't just a threat anymore, it had big asterisk N. Her employer had opened an internal review. Apparently, someone on the finance team raised concerns after spotting odd behavior, files accessed late at night, personal use of company accounts. They weren't accusing her outright, but they temporarily reassigned her while they looked into the matter. Haley tried to hold it together, at least publicly. She posted a photo of herself at a cafe, smiling, with the caption, "Some seasons force you to grow. Others break you open." But the likes were fewer now. The comments, hesitant. People were starting to distance themselves, not because they hated her, but because no one wanted to be caught in the fallout. Even her friends were pulling away. Nina stopped replying to her comments. Her yoga group quietly removed her from the WhatsApp thread. Her own sister had contacted me, not to side with me, but to tell me she was worried about Haley's state of mind. I told her gently that I couldn't help anymore. That door was closed. She reached out one last time. A voicemail. Her voice was brittle, like she hadn't slept in days. "Lucas, see. I know I messed everything up. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know where to go from here. I miss the way things used to be. I miss you. I'm sorry. I didn't call back." Some apologies arrived too late, long after the damage has rooted deep. When her 30 days were up, she left the house quietly. I wasn't there. Per court order, a neutral third party came to oversee the move. She took only the things we'd agreed upon, her clothes, personal keepsakes, a few pieces of furniture. Everything else remained untouched. She didn't fight for it. She didn't even leave a note this time. Later, I learned she was renting a small apartment near the city limits. Alone. No car, no job, and very little support. She had fallen from grace and no one was there to catch her. By spring, I had relocated to Austin. New job. New apartment. New skyline. I was doing consulting work in cybersecurity, quiet, remote, and lucrative enough to keep me focused on the present. The days were long but peaceful. My nights were no longer haunted by second-guessing or half-truths. I met someone eventually. Her name was Elise. We weren't a whirlwind romance, nothing like what Haley and I had once been. It was slower, steadier. I told her the truth early on, not every detail, but the shape of it. She didn't flinch. She didn't pry. She simply nodded and said, that kind of pain doesn't define you unless you let it. I wasn't in love again. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt seen for who I was now, not the man I used to be, or the one I pretended to be during the end. The story of Trevor made the news eventually. He was implicated in a scam involving 4 women across 3 states. Fitness coaching, fake investment schemes, money laundering through fabricated LLCs. Haley was one of the victims named in the court summary. Her sentence? A suspended ruling with mandatory restitution and financial monitoring. She avoided jail but not shame. One day she came to see me. Unannounced. I opened the door and there she was, standing on my porch, thin, pale, her eyes sunken from months of loss. She wasn't wearing makeup. No ring. Just a cardigan and a look of utter remorse. I didn't come to ask for anything, she said. I just needed to say this face to face. I'm sorry. I listened. Not because I wanted to forgive her, but because closure deserved an audience. When she was done, I nodded, stepped back, and closed the door without another word. That was the last time I saw her. Not out of cruelty, but because the man I had to become to survive her betrayal, he didn't live in that past anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was discipline. The kind you earn when you crawl out of the rubble of someone else's collapse, brush off the dust, and keep walking, alone, upright, free.